Good morning, folks. Welcome to the Rangers Reviews morning briefing on Thursday, the 20th of October. I'm Joshua Barry, joined by Stevie Clifford, which is always a pleasure. But Stevie, if there is one game that doesn't give many, doesn't have many fun talking points, it was played at Ibrox last night. Rangers 1, Dundee 0. We'll obviously go into the detail of why it was so bad and why the reaction at full time was what it was. The manager's reaction to that, which I think we'd both say was probably very honest, in his admission that not only was it not good enough, but the fans were justified to show their frustration in that way. Feels like you can't, Rangers, despite the fact they're on, I think it's 5 now domestic wins in a row, they can't afford to perform like that. I don't think they could afford to perform like that last night. They certainly can't at the weekend. Just give me a reaction to the game, Stevie, after a few hours sleep. We'll get through some comments and maybe read out some of the manager's reaction to the game as well.
First of all, good morning, mate. Good morning, everyone. This is my third appearance this week, so that's me up to £1.50 to Joshua. So it's going quite well. Johnny's looking after me that way. So in terms of last night, I think probably like everybody else, I've only just warmed up. It was absolutely freezing cold, and the performance did nothing to inspire us to anything better. Probably, as you said, we'll come to it, but probably the most honest Giovanni van Bronckhorst has been. He was pressed a wee bit, and he spoke very well. He didn't hide from anything. But I just think now, Joshua, you cannot fool this support. It was always going to be difficult to come back from the European stuff, as much as he might want to settle it or want to kind of portray it in a different manner in terms of he's been very honest about saying that he doesn't think we can compete, blah, blah, blah. It was always going to be a lot to come back from that manner of defeat. And I think the fans have run out of patience. I think you can see that in terms of how they're reacting now to performances. I think you can see, the levels of frustration. But last night, it was everything that we've said, and we don't like saying it, and we don't like being ultra critical, but uninspiring, unimaginative, passive, slow on the ball. Created a few things in the first half, and you wonder if they'd got a second, would they have kicked on? And they probably would have. But it's the same adjectives and description to use this on this team all the time. And I think now, Joshua, people are running out of patience. I don't know if it's necessarily directed all at Van Bronckhorst, but the players are they look uninspired by everything. We were looking for big individual performances last night by those that got the chance, and it didn't come. It's very laboured. And all round, mate, honestly, it's just it's not enjoyable. It's difficult. But as I said to Van Bronckhorst last night, he's got such a good domestic record. I think I've seen a stat that he's won 86% of games outside of Old Firms, which is incredible. It's higher than anybody else at this point. So I asked him last night if he still understood the level of criticism despite that. So we'll come to all that. But, my reaction from last night, we got through, Joshua. We didn't get any injuries, and we're on to Saturday, and we won. There's very else little that I can honestly sit here and say to people, that was a positive. This was good. This was that. It really wasn't.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair, Stevie. There wasn't much about that performance to excite people, and I think it goes back to the point that's been made quite a lot recently. When you've had heavy defeats, when it feels like the squad, a large chunk of that squad's at the end of its cycle, it's difficult to fall back upon a process and say, hypothetically, take Man United's win against Neil Lennon's, I think is now his ex-team at Old Trafford last week. They won 1-0 in the last minute. Now, that's not a good result comparatively for Man United, but they created so much. I think their expected goals was 4. They're at the start of a new era. People can see what the manager's trying to do and buy into that. So when maybe there isn't the goal-laden results, there isn't always the Man United dropped points against Newcastle the weekend and beat Spurs 2-0 last night. The point being that people, I think, can buy in and see the process. Whereas with Van Bronckhorst, he admitted that this himself last night, that the performances are not, I think, all is not well, he said, with the performances. So that's what makes it, I think, difficult for people to, when the results maybe haven't been there. Although, as you say, 5 domestic wins, all those heavy European defeats, and then the lack of attacking football and lack of convincing performances, I think it all kind of marries together. I'll read just a few things that the manager said last night. You can watch this on the YouTube channel or read it on our website. He was asked, what do you make of the boos at full time? He said, they are right. I wasn't happy either. When you play well, you get the applause. When you don't play well at a club like Rangers, they should boo you. We need to know and feel that the performance in the last half hour is not good enough, and we need to improve. Tomorrow, we need to analyse the game and speak to the players who underperformed and make sure that it doesn't happen again on Saturday. Going on later, he said, you're never happy after a bad performance, and the crowd reacts to it, which they have every right to do. All we can do, I can do, is keep working hard. We're still there in the league, working and fighting to become champions. But you need to be honest and see when the performances aren't well and you have to improve. And just finally, speaking a little bit more at length, I think, in response to a question you asked Stevie about, if he understood the supporters' frustration that culminated in boos at full time. Sorry, he said, I had the worst spell as a manager at finals when we lost 7 games in a row. After that, we won 5 titles in 3 years. That is football as well. You need to keep working hard and make sure you realise you're not doing well and that you need to improve. So certainly, Stevie, for me, it was quite interesting to see that the manager doesn't often, I don't think, after a performance like that, come out and be critical of his team. You think of a win at home against Dundee United, 2-1 win, which wasn't a good performance, of the game against Motherwell. I think it was clear last night that he felt frustrated at his team, and there was no kind of defence from him. The fact that, look at our domestic run recently, we're still 2 points behind in the league. We're in the League Cup semi-final. He seems to realise that performances aren't there, as he would say at the moment as well, which I guess is, would you say that's maybe different from a few weeks ago?
Well, I asked him, just on what you said at the end there, I asked him if he had a point or a reaction to the level of criticism and the boos last night, to the wider support from his point of view. And he was very open and honest, very open. And then I kind of kicked it on slightly by asking him if he understood it. And then he kind of came back and said, of course I understand it. I played for all these top clubs. So I changed it slightly because, I don't want to be disrespectful to Giovanni van Bronckhorst. He's a Rangers manager and he deserves respect. This is a guy that's captained his country in the World Cup final, Joshua. So, you've got to give him a level of respect, which he deserves, thoroughly. And even then, he's a Rangers manager. So let's, I try and do it properly. And I've went back to him and I've said, look, I'm not meaning to disparage you personally, but what I'm saying is, do you accept and understand that level of criticism? Because your domestic record is good. He does have these stats. He is in, back in the semi-final. He did win the Scottish Cup. He did take us to European final, etc. But the level of criticism for Van Bronckhorst is very, very high. And I asked him, does he accept it beyond, he could point to these things. He could say about his domestic record. He could make excuses for injuries. He could say a lot. Last night, he was very honest. And he just said to the fans, basically, we're going to have to work hard. We're going to have to continue to work hard. He recognises where we are. And in terms of you asking where it was different and if it was different, I think it was very forthright and honest. And I think, very brave in some ways of Van Bronckhorst, because we've seen managers in the past, and very arrogantly push it to the side and say, I don't know what you're talking about, or try and play it down. He never made one excuse, Joshua. He never offered anything in terms of, a counter argument back to me. He never once said, look, do you know what? I think you're being harsh, or do you know what? They've got these circumstances. We've got injuries. We've got this and that. He plainly took the question on, gave us a very forthright and long answer to it. And he showed a wee bit of passion. He showed a wee bit of kind of fight for it. So It's about, trying to get that onto the pitch because, at the moment we're seeing what we're seeing. But in terms of was it different, I'm not sure it was different as such. He's getting a different type of question now, Van Bronckhorst, but he's not hiding from it. Certainly, he's fronting up and he's taking it on, which I like, and he's not pulling any punches with what he says. So, there was a lot to be admired about what he said last night. And I know people maybe watch it and people think, this is boring, this is generic. Last night wasn't. It was a really different press conference. He was very, and he was pushed and he was pressed on things. So, we've talked about this before. There's got to be a level of understanding in a press conference about how you conduct yourself and what you go on to. So I thought last night was very interesting. Was it different? I think it's just a different scenario now, Joshua, in terms of he's not getting such an easy ride anymore. He's not, it's not a happy place in terms of you can go in and go, what do you think of that performance? You've scored 4 goals, man of the match, blah, blah, blah. There's more pressing things to ask him, and he fronted up and asked it well.
Yeah, let's get into some of the, I guess, more details of the performance, Stevie. Rangers, I thought, actually, in the first half had some decent moments. It was an inability to kind of kick on. I thought Yilmaz in the first half looked good for me. You could see how he made a positive contribution, in my opinion, from left back in possession. I was slightly surprised at the team that Tavernier and Lundstrom played because I think they look like they need a rest, but also on the evidence of last night, the leaders in the team were obviously needed there as well. Kind of, I guess, regardless of what you think of their performance, the thing that stuck out to me, Stevie, was it was comfortable for Dundee. Dundee are a championship team. Their manager in the press conference after, he was frustrated that they didn't have a little bit more of a goal, which I think contextualizes how they viewed the game. They obviously seen some vulnerability they were able to target. But also what struck me was it was so easy for Dundee to kind of escape pressure. Rangers weren't able to pin them in and kind of constantly create chances. And I think that all comes down to tempo, your tempo on and off the ball, which then plays into maybe a pace of game that suits Dundee. What do you make of that? What did you make of Rangers' performance with what they did with the ball and didn't? And do you think that a number of fringe players maybe didn't take their opportunity sufficiently, because the managers certainly seemed to think that after the game?
No, they didn't. To go back to the point on Ridvan, what I liked about him was I thought he was very progressive, very attacking. Not once did he shuttle the ball back the way we've seen in other performances, Borna Barisic. But Scott Wright had a lot to do with that in the first half as well, because he was very progressive and very attacking. And when he got the ball, he looked to run and try and create things. So it was a combined effort of both of them, with naturally comfortable with each other. And, it was decent. It wasn't outstanding or anything then 2-0, but it was decent. I like the fact that Ridvan would try things, even if it was a tighter pass going forward, even if it was driving inside, even if he was going into little corridors of, where it was tight or where he had to squeeze through spaces and that, he still tried it. So he done absolutely fine in the first half, as did Scott Wright. And we were knocking about all right. Tempo was fairly decent. Didn't create massive amounts of stuff. Alfie's got a chance that he should tuck away and then to have, hits a volley straight at the goalkeeper. So I'm getting emotional, Joshua, talking about this. It's like post match stress, having to go through it all again. But we didn't create massive amounts. We were comfortable. Comfortable was fine, but there's nothing exciting about it. It wasn't. It's not like we're banging down the doors of Dundee and pressing them and hounding them and pushing them into areas they don't want to be. It was all very comfortable, like you said, and that concerns me for a championship side, that we've taken the lead, after in the first 10 minutes and not then pushed on and put the game to bed. And then, if you're 2-3-0 up and you get a second half like last night, you understand it because they've switched off and you can say they're looking forward to Saturday and things like that, but they weren't. Mm-hmm. And people like Fashion Sakala who were given that opportunity, and this comes to your point of, did people take their opportunity? The answer is no. Nobody did last night. There's a massive discussion to be had over Alfredo Morelos. He looks completely disinterested. And it's tough to say because people will then say you've got a bee in your bonnet about Alfredo. I wasn't the only one that commented on it last night. The shirt looks heavy. He looks like he's, at times walking in quicksand. He's not interested in his movement is miles away from what Cholak's is. And I think we've got a real issue with Alfredo in terms of, one, is he able to get back to his very best? Two, does he want to get back to his very best? Excuse me. And three, does he want to be here? Certainly under this regime. So he looks very... I don't know what you make of Alfredo last night, Joshua, but when you think about how good he can be and the levels we expect of him, and even the levels of effort when Gio and Roy Mackay and things first came, I think he's miles away from that. And we highlight him because we know how good he can be, and in a team like last night, and then against a championship team, you expect more from him. But I thought he was miles off, and I think that kind of speaks volumes of the performance all round. In terms of Rangers coasted through it, very passive individually and collectively. In terms of leadership, Tavernier and Lundstrom, well, there's now this interview with Lundstrom coming out with Paddy the Baddie in the podcast. What the hell he's doing on there, speak to him, I'll never know. But he admits he's been injured for 3 weeks and he went for a scan and he struggled through games and stuff and blah, blah, blah. What are we doing here? Are we just running players into the ground? Because it feels a wee bit like that. He said that James Tavernier isn't injured, and he's right to say that. We spoke about that yesterday. But everybody looking at him can see that there's issues and there's stuff going on. So, yeah, we have to have leadership in there. I understand it, Joshua, but not at the detriment to players, and that's my worry at the moment. It's all just a wee bit... It's all just a wee bit flat, uninspiring, unimaginative. There's no pace to anything we do. It's very laboured. There's always 4 touches when really 2's needed. And there just seems to be a malaise just everywhere at the moment. And Van Bronckhorst can't shake it. But I think Van Bronckhorst as well, he's normally out the edges, technical area, barking orders and things like that. The last few games he's sat down. So I don't know if everybody's just in a bit of a slump and confidence is really drained. But even confidence...
Well, I think we might have just lost Stevie momentarily there. Let me know if you can still hear me, folks. Hopefully it's not me. Let me know in the comments below. I'll just reply to what his point was while we're waiting for him to come back on the stream. Look, Rangers know that if you look at the squad and who's out of contract next summer, who... whether that be players like Kent and Morelos or people like Davis, Jack, kind of Hollander, part of the... I can see that we can hear me. Thanks for that. Stevie's had enough. I'll try to get him back in a wee second. There's a lot of people that are out of contract, and last season, obviously, Rangers are penalty kicks away from kind of immortality. But I think all the evidence so far, and we wrote this the other day, looking about when do you judge a transfer window? I think it's very hard to say that it was the right decision to not do more of a refresh in the summer, and whether that be spending the money that was spent in particular areas of the pitch, or just how no money can have been spent deep in the midfield. I just think it looks like the wrong decision to stick with this group and not refresh it more. Obviously, I think before the European run kind of materialized into getting to Seville, that was very much the belief that it should have been refreshed, and I think that deteriorated slightly as the run went on. But now, when you look at it, the number of starters that maybe haven't been signed in recent years, is kind of hard to defend that decision. We haven't got Stevie anymore. I think his Wi-Fi is run out. Either that or he's chucked it. But I think it will be the former. So what I'll do is I will just read through a few comments. It'll be maybe a slightly shorter morning briefing, but you hear enough from us anyway. So that is absolutely fine. One comment here asking for some of the numbers from last night, so I will read those out Rangers' expected goals was 1.75 to 0.5. You know, if Alfredo Morelos scores that chance at 2-0, it becomes a different game. But he didn't. And that speaks to maybe the fact that in many ways, I think a lot of kind of 60 minutes at Ibrox this season haven't been that dissimilar to that one last night. You know, you think of games like Kilmarnock at home when it was 0-0 until Cholak scores that goal kind of on the counter-attack, or St Mirren, it was 2-0 and they could have easily got the game back to 2-1. Mark O'Hara, I think, had the chance in the first half at 1-1, but then he had the chance, you'll remember, in the back post that McGregor made a really good save from, and that could have made it 2-1. But I think Rangers have used the bench well, or they've been able to rely on Cholak to score goals. And last night that didn't happen, and it maybe just exposed some of the elements that have been covered up slightly by results so far. The shots, Rangers had 15 shots to Dundee's 7. Dundee had 0.5 expected goals. As their manager said, he wanted them to take a little bit more advantage of the kind of counter-attacking opportunities they had, the moments in transition. And again, reading his tone after the game, when you're a championship manager coming to Ibrox and you've lost 1-0 and you're frustrated, I think that very much tells the kind of story of the game and how poor it was from a Rangers point of view. Rangers almost 700 passes. They had a lot of control. Dundee 300, 70% possession for Rangers to Dundee's 30%. But I think definitely one of the main issues in and out of possession for Rangers, that intensity. What was lacking in the first half, I thought Tillman made some quite clever runs beyond the defence that were unfortunate to not be found. Morelos managed to link play on a few occasions, but Rangers, I think their performance levels completely dropped off after the game went 1-0, weren't able to add to the lead, and that led to the malaise, as Stevie called it, by the end of the game. I think we'll leave it there without Stevie, obviously here to carry me on. But we'll have lots of coverage over the next few days. I've got a piece out on the website just now, which you can read in the link in the description, which says, speaking about the fact that Van Bronckhorst, I think, is acknowledging the level of performances. He's saying supporters are right to boo. And what does that mean? How many more performances can Rangers afford like that, as we keep going back to, because people still want to be entertained? I think that's I've said that a few times over the last week, but as well as everyone supporting teams through loyalty and all these things, people want to be entertained, and that's no bad thing at all. It's not greedy to ask for a bit more goalmouth action. I think at home to Dundee, who, must be said, I think applied themselves well. Rangers obviously have Livingston coming up at the weekend. They have 7 games before the World Cup break, and very feasibly they could still be within touching distance, could still be 2 points behind by the time that World Cup break rolls around. They have 7 games between now and then, I believe, away against St Mirren and St Johnstone, I think Hearts, Aberdeen and Livingston at home. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'll be impressed if I got that off the top of my head. But Livingston in particular will not be an easy game whatsoever. It took a Scott Arfield goal late. You remember it was a strange kind of over the head volley that he scored, a 1-0 win back in, I think it was maybe the end of January. Something else that Van Bronckhorst has mentioned in recent days is the fact that certain players are out, players like Tom Lawrence, and that impacts the team performance. And there is a number of players to come back. I thought Roof last night looked sharp, and he looked very interested, and he hasn't played football in a long time, and we know the caveat with Kemar Roof that how long will he be back for before he's injured. But I think certainly the manager is in the team is in a difficult spell form-wise, a very difficult spell, still picking up results domestically, but it appears a very fragile situation, and the performances, they just simply need to improve. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And I don't think it will help the fact that players like Tavernier and Lundstrom had to play 90 minutes last night. But you can subscribe if you want to read more as we dig into why that is the case, as we look at the numbers behind it. You can read Stevie's opinion every week, which I know everyone really enjoys. If it's just £1 a month, the link is in the description below and in the comments section as well. Derek will be back tomorrow, I believe, with Johnny for Friday's morning briefing. I won't be here, but both of them, well, I'm away on holiday tomorrow, so I'll leave you in their good company. Thanks for joining us. Sorry it is slightly shorter, with Stevie's Wi-Fi deciding to give, and obviously decided he's done enough morning briefings this week. But thanks very much for joining us. Remember to subscribe, and we will speak to you soon.